By the end of his life, Aerys Targaryen II had become a walking nightmare. He sat atop a bladed throne, his hair matted and fingernails grown into twisted claws, screaming for pyromancers to burn his city to ashes. Today, history remembers him simply as the Mad King. He is the ultimate tyrant, the ruler whose escalating, erratic cruelty forced his lords to rise up and violently tear the Targaryen dynasty apart. But jump back to the year 262 AC, and you find a completely different person. At his coronation, Aerys was young, exceptionally charismatic, and fully in control of his faculties. He was an ambitious leader, taking the reins of a wealthy, powerful kingdom. The lords of Westeros looked at their new sovereign and saw the promise of a prosperous, highly stable future for the realm. So how do we get from a capable, celebrated young monarch to a ravenous tyrant executing his own subjects? The truth is, Aerys wasn't born insane. His mind eroded over decades, eaten away by deep insecurities, severe trauma, and the absolute, unquestionable power of the Iron Throne. The early years of Aerys' reign were highly effective, largely because of the man beside him. He appointed his childhood friend, Tywin Lannister, as Hand of the King, a disciplined, ruthlessly practical administrator. As Tywin managed the kingdom, taxes flowed efficiently and infrastructure improved. But success bred a specific kind of resentment. Soon, courtiers were whispering that Tywin was the actual ruler of Westeros, and that the king merely wore the crown. For a monarch obsessed with respect, those rumors were intolerable. Aerys began actively sabotaging his own government to spite his hand. He insulted Tywin publicly, reversed policies on a whim, and made increasingly erratic decisions just to assert his authority. This petty rivalry slowly poisoned the king's mind over a decade. But the true breaking point arrived in 277 AC, during a seemingly minor tax dispute known as the Defiance of Duskendale. Convinced of his own absolute invulnerability, Aerys traveled to Duskendale with almost no guards to negotiate the dispute personally. The trap snapped shut. Lord Darkland captured the king, locking him away in a dark dungeon for 6 agonizing months. Sir Barristan Selmy eventually executed a legendary solo rescue, sneaking into the castle and pulling the king out alive. But the damage to his psyche was permanent. The trauma of that captivity destroyed whatever mental stability Aerys had left. His earlier jealousies vanished, replaced entirely by a suffocating, paralyzing paranoia. Back in King's Landing, Aerys refused to leave the safety of the Red Keep. He stopped allowing blades near his skin, leaving his hair and nails to grow wildly out of control, and began treating every servant and lord as a potential assassin. Looking at this diagram of the royal court, you can see how his suspicion dismantled his own support system. He alienated his traditional allies and turned his paranoia towards his popular son, Prince Rhaegar, viewing his heir as another rival plotting against him. Stripped of reliable counsel, Aerys turned to a darker source. Notice how the king's remaining connections collapse entirely down to a single group, the pyromancers. He became dangerously obsessed with wildfire, a volatile green explosive, viewing it as a divine tool for purification. His justice became macabre. Accused traitors were no longer swiftly beheaded. Instead, they were burned alive, with the king often watching the executions with visible pleasure. This cruelty eventually collided with the highest lords of the realm. When Brandon Stark rode to King's Landing demanding justice for his missing sister, Aerys arrested him and summoned his father, Lord Rickard. The promised trial was a horrific spectacle. Rickard Stark was suspended above a roaring fire in full armor and slowly roasted. Brandon was forced to watch, tied to a strangulation device, choking himself to death as he desperately tried to reach his burning father. After executing 2 of the most powerful lords in Westeros, Aerys immediately demanded the heads of their young wards, Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. The lords of the realm recognized that no one was safe. They called their banners, and open rebellion began.